follow the highlighted route. Please follow the highlighted route, continuing down the auditorium. Look at the audience to the left, continuing straight ahead toward the stage. Just a few more feet until you reach the speakers. Don't trip over the speakers. And around and onto the stage, continuing straight ahead. At the next intersection, turn left. Turn left, recalculating, recalculating, recalculating. You have reached your destination. So how many of you have a GPS in your car? And how many of you have it set to the female voice? Interesting. Then we may have taken lots of fabulous trips together. Now, as a voice in over 25 million GPS units in cars around the world, many, many, many people come up to me and they want to share stories with me about their relationship with their GPS. And they all have one. They have a relationship with their GPS. They want to tell me about the time when we went to Milwaukee together to their cousin's wedding. And they want to tell me about the time we were in Italy, and if it wasn't for me, we would still be lost in the mountains. But the one thing they want to share with me more than anything else is about the word recalculating. They don't like that word. You don't like that word, do you? Makes you feel bad. You did something wrong, you took a wrong turn. Bad girl, recalculating. So I explain to them, well, here's the thing. They tell me that I'm yelling at them. Do you feel like I get angry when I say the word recalculating? You do when I take a wrong turn. And people come up to me and they say, you know, when you say the word recalculating, you get angry. And I explain to them, my voice doesn't change. When I recorded the voice system that ended up in all those GPS units, we recorded for almost 50 hours. And we only recorded 4 hours at a time because they did not want my voice to sound fatigued. They wanted me to stay calm and consistent. They wanted my voice to be calm and consistent, so I know my voice doesn't change. When I say recalculating, it's just like every other direction. But isn't it funny how when we're driving in our car and we make a wrong turn and we hear the word recalculating, we think the GPS is yelling at us because we made a wrong turn. Now, I am here to tell you that recalculating is good news. It's reassurance. It's like a new beginning, a fresh start. For golfers, it's like a mulligan. And when you hear the word recalculating, you're already back on track. It's like a do-over. And I believe that we can recalculate at any time in life, just like we can in our car. Now, when we take a wrong turn in our car, we hear the instructions after we hear the word recalculating. We get back on track, headed toward our destination. And then when we take a wrong turn in life, we come off the highway and we wander around on a back road, sometimes for years, aimlessly. I mean, think of all those people who've made major wrong turns in life. No one in here, none of us, right? No, we haven't made any wrong turns. But just think about that. If only they had remembered to use the word recalculating. Now, how many of you have been in an aeroplane? Almost all of us, right? Fantastic. Now, I don't want to scare you, but did you know that an aeroplane is always off course? It is constantly readjusting little tiny course corrections one at a time toward the destination. And it's not that different in a car. I want you to put your hands up on the steering wheel. That's it, at 10 and 2. Now remember when you first started to learn how to drive, how there was just, you know, a lot of big movements. And then over time, we got the hang of it. And then when you're heading down a straight road, you are still making slight adjustments, little tiny course corrections. Even when you've got the cruise control on, you've still got to have at least one hand on the wheel. Now I want to take you right back to the beginning. I am originally from a town called Mackay in North Queensland, near Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Paradise. And when I was growing up, One day I saw Olivia Newton-John on the television. She was the actress and singer who was in the movie Grease, which I must have seen millions of times. And when I saw her, my life changed. I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I knew that I wanted to be a professional singer and move to America. And ultimately, I accomplished both of those things, but at the time I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do that. I knew it was my destination, but I didn't know how I was going to reach it. Now, when I was a little girl, I was 7 years old, I would dream of my singing voice and my songs coming out of the car radio, singing, "Strong woman is what I see and hear. A strong woman will soon be standing here." And I never imagined that it would be my speaking voice coming out of all of those GPS units around the world, giving drivers directions. And ultimately, I recalculated my entire business. And now, as well as giving people directions in their cars, I'm giving people directions in life. And that is totally unexpected. And I've had to recalculate my thinking. I'm delighted, but completely surprised. I want you to know that you never need to be embarrassed about referring back to your roadmap. So how do you know when it's time to recalculate? How you know it is time to recalculate is things haven't gone as planned. I get angry. I'm upset. I'm annoyed. Or I simply don't feel like it. That's when I know I need to recalculate. And what we want to do is we want to shift the energy. We want to shift gears so that we don't get stuck in that feeling. And here is how I recommend we do it. I have the 5 directions for recalculating. Number 1 is just to simply notice you're off route, to notice that you've taken a wrong turn. Number 2 is to be willing to make a change. Number 3 is to look toward your destination. Number 4 is to move from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. And number 5 is to take an action. Any action, just a simple action. You might want to walk around the block to clear your head, get on the phone to a friend to talk it through, or simply to take a deep breath. Why don't we do that right now together? Ready? That feels so much better. Now, there are those little tiny recalculations in life, and then there are those major life recalculations. And I want to share with you about one of my major life recalculations. Now, you've heard of the GFC, the global financial crisis? Well, my husband and I had what we refer to as our PFC, our personal financial crisis. And back in 2004, I got to marry the love of my life, my husband Tom. And he came with an uncooperative ex-wife. Now, they were divorced, but financially, they weren't completely divorced. And as we started to untangle this situation, it led to a lot of legal time and ultimately legal bills. And this continued for 5 years. Now, in August of 2007, we started to get ourselves deep into credit card debt. And in August of 2007, we thought we'd found a way to recalculate. We were so excited because things really were in a bad way. And we'd come into a small amount of money, but not enough to pay off those debts. But we thought, why don't we buy an apartment? We'll use that money as a down payment for an apartment, and then we can consolidate all of that debt, that 30% interest rates that we were paying at that time, remember those? And put them down into an 8% mortgage, and this was going to be a fantastic plan. So we bought an apartment and we got a subprime mortgage. You know those mortgages that you could get where you didn't have to show any paperwork that you could afford the mortgage? Because you probably couldn't afford the mortgage. We got one of those. It was so good. And we closed on the apartment, and our plan was that a month later we would refinance and consolidate all of that debt down into our 8% mortgage. So a month later, I called our mortgage guy, Tim, and I said, Tim, it's Karen. We're ready to refinance our mortgage and consolidate our credit card debt. And Tim said, oh, Karen, I'm sorry, but they've just changed the laws and they've stopped those mortgages. they're no longer available. And by this time, I was pregnant with our son Hayden. And my husband Tom, who's a production manager in the music business, his work had started to dry up. And the legal bills kept on coming. And rock bottom. We were living in a brand new, gorgeous Manhattan apartment. And we didn't have the money for groceries. I mean, it was a ludicrous situation, right? It's crazy. It's crazy. So we still took another year to finally stop and recalculate. We'd let it get really bad. But we knew we needed to do something radical. So let's go back to our 5 steps for recalculating. Number 1, to notice that you're off route. We had noticed for quite some years at that time that we were off route. So let's skip to number 2. And number 2 is to be willing to make a change. Now, not just a small itty-bitty kind of change, but to be willing to make a real change, a kind of a one way or another, I am determined we are going to get to our destination kind of change. Number 3 is to look toward the destination, and for us, that was financial freedom. Number 4 was to move from the passenger seat to the driver's seat, and we were ready for that. And number 5 was to take an action, and we took massive action, one little action at a time. And here's what we did. We rented out our apartment, our beautiful new home we did not want to leave, and we rented it out and we put tenants in there so that we could bring in some income right away. And we got on the phone and we booked tickets to Australia with our frequent flyer miles. And we flew out to Australia where we lived with my parents for a whole year while we got back on our feet, rent-free. I did deals with 19 credit card companies. Did you know that you can actually negotiate the finance charges and interest rates with credit card companies? And I did that with 19 of them. And, you know, from when I was a little girl, I was always a good girl. I wanted to do the right thing. I was terrified of getting in trouble. So you can imagine the feeling of one phone call at a time, ringing 19 credit card companies to try and rein in this disaster we had created for ourselves financially. We continued to recalculate. I spent 5 months on the phone with the IRS to do a payment plan for our back taxes. And then I spent 11 months on the phone with the mortgage company, from January to December. And on Christmas Eve of 2009, the modification for our mortgage was approved. It was the most fantastic Christmas present you could imagine. And we began to make plans to move back into our own home. Now, we've paid off the IRS, we've resolved all the legal issues, and our almost $90,000 in credit card debt is now down to $7,081.52. We live with a crystal clear budget, and we know where every penny goes. And I feel fortunate. I feel so fortunate that we had families who would help us and help us to get back on our feet. And I feel really fortunate that I have a husband who was willing to live with his in-laws for a whole year. Now, when you recalculate in a major way like this, there's almost always an unexpected reward, and for us it was pretty obvious. Our 15-month-old son got to spend a year with his grandparents, and they loved it. And I got to reconnect with my homeland. And my husband Tom and I, we got to really see what we are made of. Now, recalculating can only begin when you are willing to admit you are lost. You cannot choose, you cannot always choose what happens to you in life, but we can always choose our experience or how we react to what is happening. I'm going to say that again. Recalculating can only begin when you are willing to admit you're lost. and that you can't always choose the things that are happening to us in life, but you can always choose your experience. You can always choose how you react to what is happening. Now, I have some directions for you. You know, I love to tell people where to go and what to do. So, I want you to think about one thing in your life that isn't going in the direction you want it to, that isn't going the way that you want it to. And I want you to think about being willing to make a change and not to be afraid of that change. And then we're going to go through those 5 directions for recalculating. So number 1 is just to notice that you are off route. Number 2 is to be willing to make that change, to make a change that you're going to see to it this time, to get to that destination and look toward that destination. And number 4 is to move from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. And number 5 is to take an action. Just one step, one little direction toward that destination. Now, I want you to remember that you can use your GPS as your personal motivational device. Next time you're in your car and you make a wrong turn and you hear the word recalculating, remember, this is good news. You are already back on track. You can use it as a reminder to get into the driver's seat, that you can get into the driver's seat in your life. So when you hear that, when you hear the GPS say recalculating, I want you to remember it's good news. It's a new beginning. You're already back on track. And even though it may not seem like it, I am not yelling at you. You have reached your destination. Thank you. This is the first time it's ever happened in TED history that there's time left. So do you want to practice recalculating? Oh, come on. I'm going to ask again. Do you want to practice recalculating? Okay, so I need you to give me a beat. Can you give me a beat? Okay, I want you to repeat after me. You ready? Recalculating, 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 recalculating. I want you to say it like you mean it. Oh, yes. Recalculating, recalculating. Up the back. Recalculating. Thank you very much. You guys are fantastic. Have a great day.